Alright, today we'll be getting over to chapter 16, the stepping stone of the Gathering of Soldiers, part 1. And here's a disclaimer, and back to the actual picture. Chapter 16, the stepping stone. Yes, finally, we're back! Thomas shouted as he stood in front of the fortress western gate. Soon afterwards, Thomas and his men confidently walked through and headed towards their barracks. Hey, why are you guys late? When Commander Cairo shouted, the 5 soldiers immediately stopped in their tracks and turned around to face him. We were trying to get our mining complex ready for construction, Thomas said in a blank face. Commander Kairos grunted and stood up. I thought you were only using yesterday to do it. That's the plan that we hope to achieve it. However, there have been quite a few springers in our plans, so we used today's morning to get more things done, Thomas said. Commander Carlos approached closer to Thomas. Morning? It's already dinner time right now. You have lost some integrity, Thomas. Thomas raised his hands and had a surprised look. What? I thought you gave us permission to be away for planning out the mine. We were actually working yesterday and this morning too, hustling around the streets of Constantinopolis and even went to Salimbria to have a discussion with a professional miner. It just took a long time to sail back here from Salimbria. Furthermore, we have more supplies for our siphon fires. He then pointed at 2 carts with 4 barrels of siphon liquid. Therefore, I thought it would be okay to use another day. By Thomas' reasoning, Commander Kairos raised his eyebrows in disbelief. He couldn't believe that Thomas was actually able to acquire a miner to help him out. Wait, so you really got into contact with someone? Commander Kairos came closer again. Thomas bit his mouth in nervousness. Yes, I'm serious. If you have time, you could come with us there. I promise. Commander Kairos looked at Thomas for a moment. It's fine. I trust you. I'll let you guys pass then. Don't be so reckless next time with requesting permissions. Thanks, Commander, Thomas said. Thomas was about to move again, but he thought of something else. Commander, when does Lord Pericles come back with other soldiers? I told you back then that he's coming back on Saturday, probably during lunchtime. Why do you ask? Commander Cairo said. Because we would like to have certain days to work on setting up the mining location in order to get everything ready by this fall, and at the latest by winter. If we're going to do that, then we need to start it very soon, Thomas said. Commander Kairos carefully looked at Thomas. It was obvious that Thomas had that look which explained that his mind was set on getting his mining complex and that nothing was going to stop him at it. Therefore, Commander Kairos sighed. He sighed because he wasn't really fond of Thomas when he gave that kind of look. Commander Kairos shook his head. Okay, you guys do what you need to do. I'll try to set up a meeting between you guys and Lord Pericles on Saturday. Gee, thanks, Commander, you're the best, Thomas said and started walking. After that, they parted their ways from Commander Kairos. Soon afterwards, Thomas turned back to his friends. I told you we'll get off of this easily. Commander Kairos is too easy to talk your way out, Thomas said. Then they went back to their barracks. What happened afterwards was so mundane and unnecessary to mention, so it's safe to transition right over to Saturday morning when Thomas and his fellow soldiers have their Saturday discussion. We'll use this room for our discussion, Thomas said as he opened the door to a meeting room. All soldiers of Thomas and Captain Claus sat around in whatever seats they felt like. There followed in the 5 staff members of their platoon as well. Passios was confused because he thought today was Saturday and the discussions were only done with the groups under a single captain. But what Thomas said afterwards surprised him. Now, I would like to know who is truly with me in the Halki Islands mining operation. That means, if you're with me, then you must be ready to contribute your time, knowledge, work, money, and everything else in your utmost capabilities in getting the mining complex ready to go by at least this coming winter or earlier. Raise your hands if you're with me at this level. Thomas looked around at his fellow soldiers. Suddenly, a thick and uneasy atmosphere fell into the room, and the soldiers began shifting in their seats uncomfortably. Thomas cleared his throat. "This is the reward if you partake with me in this venture. You will be able to take your share of the profits of that mining complex. I am a man of integrity, and I will give you my word that you'll be able to receive unbiased share, depending on how much you put your effort, money, and everything else in making the industry to start." Ephraim raised his hand to start it off. "Come on, you guys," said Placidus and Apasios. "Raise your hands. We were with him when we traveled together yesterday." Ephraim said, and Apasios raised his hand, along with others he mentioned. Officer Kai slowly raised his hand, and his action was followed by Edwin, Andel, and Lucio, who did the same. Thomas nodded towards them, appreciating their willingness to join. What happened afterwards surprised many people in the room. Officer Anatolius cleared his throat. "I would like to join." Captain Claus slapped his legs in shock. "Wait, what? Why?" He then turned to face Officer Anatolius. "I see a fire in Captain Thomas' eyes, a fire of determination. And think about it. Has there ever been a thing in which Captain Thomas failed? Not the small things, but great things such as this," Officer Anatolius said. Thomas thanked Officer Anatolius before speaking his mind. "I wish that all of you joined me on this. I changed my mind now. You don't need to contribute so much. In fact, you don't need to pay anything to join. But know that your reward is in proportion to how much you have contributed. So again, if you would like to join, then raise your hand," Thomas said. Placidus' engineering partner raised his hand. He was followed by Officer Anatolius' group of soldiers who raised their hands. "You know what? I'm in." Captain Claw's words became the nail in the coffin for everyone else to be raising their hands. "Thank you, guys. Now, I want you all to take turns signing onto this paper," Thomas said at the end when everyone had raised their hands. When the signing was done, Thomas took over the paper. "That's right! We need to stay together as a group." Thomas suddenly stood up and folded his arms over his chest in triumph. "You're all dismissed. Go into your various groups and have your discussions. Oh, Placidus, you and your partner join us for the discussion, and other guys join Captain Claw's group." With that, everyone went to their respective places, and Captain Claw's group left in search of their own place to discuss. Pasius was glad that the meeting went through smoother than he had expected. Thomas saw them leaving and sat back in his seat when everyone had left. "Alright, guys, we will now start our discussion." He paused for a while to wait for his group members to sit together into a circle, and then cleared his throat before resuming his talk. "Due to the absence of Lord Pericles, we were left on this island like lost sheep, confused and dumbfounded. However, it became a time for us to reflect on ourselves as a group and work towards bettering ourselves. Throughout the last 5 days, we were on our way to find out who we really are and thrive even against our previous mistakes due to the tenacity and perseverance to withstand our hardships. I give all credit to the Lord Almighty for allowing us to survive for so long and get the beginnings of our mining complex to be secured for the start. Our stepping stone, our pillar of greatness, and the pride of our innermost hearts and souls. I hope and pray that the Lord Almighty allows us to continue and obtain full permission from Lord Pericles for our mining complex and everything else we may need. With this, may He bless our meeting for today." "Well spoken." Thomas' short speech was followed by amens from the soldiers who agreed, and some went further to clap him. "Hey, Placidus, why don't you introduce your partner to Apasios? He never had the chance to get to know him," Thomas added before pointing the speech staff at Placidus. Placidus was about to speak, but his partner decided that he'll introduce himself. "Hello, Apasios. I'm Constance, another engineer in our platoon, and I'm from Mesembria, a Roman town on the Bulgarian coast way up in the northwest from Constantinopolis. The executives recruited me due to my engineering capabilities and various connections thanks to my father. It's been 4 years ever since. Over those years, Placidus and I worked with other engineers to design various buildings in the fortress, and in other spare times, we helped out in the town's needs. I look forward to working with you in this organization." When Constance's talk was over, Thomas handed the speech staff to Ephraim to continue. Hey folks, I know that times are hard, and Lord Pericles may bring us a surprise in our fortress, but we shall not be weak-minded and collapse, but we shall remain strong and let no one divide us as a group. They may be bringing a rude awakening for us, for I perceive that the atmosphere is thick with uncomfortable feelings. Ephraim tapped on his chair's leg twice with a fit speech staff. However, we've always stood together and worked side by side and helping one another. Kai, I appreciate your work in keeping your men together, including those of Magnus while we were away. And Placidus, thanks for coming along with me and Thomas on our venture in Constantinopolis and yonder in Celebriya. But most of all, I believe that each individual in our group must be strong enough to stand by himself when help is gone, so that he can help others who are in need. And in the end, we'll all be able to create a group of true soldiers who can stand against any calamity. Towards the end, he began making a fist with his right hand and lifting it up in the air in front of him to portray his strength that others must have. This looked hilarious to other soldiers, and they laughed immediately. However, the point was delivered, and they immediately voiced their agreements. But sadly, it seemed that Apollonius was the only one who didn't understand, or the only one who dared to raise his hand. Ephraim, what does being strong enough to stand by himself mean? Can't everyone here stand by himself? He stated that as if it was quite hard to do. Some soldiers chuckled due to Apollonius' way of asking such a question. He sounded very genuine, and it definitely wasn't that he was simply checking on Ephraim's knowledge, but wanted to really get to know the truth. Ephraim smiled. Apollonius, when I said that each individual must be strong enough to stand by himself, I didn't mean it in a literal sense. It was something beyond the literal, in which quite many soldiers find it hard to do things by himself, like solving problems that he faces on his own, such as disputes, quarrels, compromises between other soldiers, persevering through emotional financial hardships or physical injuries. He paused to get a breath, or something that everyone must have, so to live a quality life, which is a dream, whether it changes frequently, an existence of a dream to be someone or do something allows for a quality and potentially satisfying life that a soldier can live at the moment. Therefore, standing by himself isn't really whether you physically stand, but through many other aspects mental, physical, content of his character, willingness and zeal to accomplish his goals. Would he obtain the ability to help others and to surround himself with people who would help him in return? Pasio slowly nodded, because it was difficult for him to absorb the hard words that came out of the mouth of Ephraim. Therefore, Placidus raises his hand to comment. Ephraim, you should hold it there. Pasius will eventually learn, Placidus said. Ephraim nodded and handed the speech staff to Apasius. First of all, I would like to thank Thomas and Ephraim for always working and thinking hard and coming up with various events for us to participate in, such as planning out the mining complex in Halki Island. I really loved the idea, and that's why I participated my best in it. Also, their great leadership in every little thing, including starting off the Saturday discussions, is very smooth for everyone else to immediately be comfortable in them from the beginning. In my opinion, they are the natural leaders. One can't possibly learn that trait through years of experience, but he must be born with it. And that's what I really appreciate. I also thank you two engineers, Placidus and Constance, for being the closest allies to us crossbowmen and gunners, always willing to help in our need. Pasio stopped to look around at others. I don't have any questions on anyone, so I will end my turn. Pasius passed the speech staff to Lucio, who literally snatched it away from his hand. Watch it, Lucio. Not so fast, Officer Kai said. Lucio glared at Officer Kai before clearing his throat to speak. Hey, Sid. Back in Constantinopolis on Sunday, when I was helping Captain Claw's group in transporting cattle, I noticed you sneaking something from the Malay guy's ship. Mind if you share what that was? If that was stealing, then ooh, disciplinary action shall be waiting. Lucio was always a fighter whenever Saturday discussions came along. He would antagonize anyone who seemed to be least ready for it, and he often had what to say against somebody, or he would have valiant defense on anyone who accused him with anything. However, Seth maintained his composure and didn't let Lucio's accusation get the best of him. It was because I partook in a scouting group during that raid on the town. One of the two Malay guys who went with me gave some cheese and fish to me as thanks for helping them out. I was just rushing down their ship after taking what was rightfully mine, and you were just too quick to notice me but not see the other two guys who came down later, Seth said. Lucio frowned a bit due to his inability to trap Seth, his arch-rival. Therefore, he sadly withdrew his speech staff from pointing at Seth. Well, I'm done here, Kai. You're next. Pasios felt a negative atmosphere oozing from Lucio. It didn't feel good at all, so he took a peek and noticed that Lucio had his head dropped low and eyes closed. On the other hand, Officer Kai, Andel, and Edvin weren't like Lucio, so they simply spoke their parts and passed the speech staff on to Placidos. Placidos smiled. I have a question for Thomas and Ephraim. Why did you guys venture out for the mining complex? Upon hearing such a question, Thomas nodded at Ephraim to reply for both of them. Ephraim shrugged. Because we wanted to earn more money. Placidos took a while to digest the information and assess the two men's outlook carefully. That is not enough of an answer. I'm pretty sure you guys have something more than that. Thomas sighed for a while. That's our answer, Placidos. Don't try to open up more. Well, you said that you want us to be with you on this venture. Placidos spread out his arms and smirked. What's the point of joining the venture if we are kept in the dark from knowing what's really going on in you guys' minds? And our inability to obtain the truth may potentially interfere with our full cooperation with you guys. That's why I'm speaking on behalf of all our fellow comrades here who would be curious about it too. Soon, some soldiers began nodding in agreement and chuckling due to the funny situation, and others smiled while looking at Thomas and Ephraim for the answer. Thomas couldn't take it anymore, so he raised his hand for everyone to quiet down for him to speak. Our primary reason was to possibly get more money, but you're right about something else hidden in my message. We were afraid that the absence of Lord Pericles telling us what to do and Commander Kairos getting busy with the archers would cause disunity in our groups and decrease the trust and bond amongst the members. People need to be talking more and doing more things with each other if they want to maintain cordial and friendly relations. Lastly, it was for our prestige as a captain and as highest ranking officer, and most of all, the group as a whole. We wanted us to eventually be recognized in the Principal Fortress as soldiers who have a righteous cause in them and a zeal to live as fighters, who won't break during the slowness of certain days. I agree with Ephraim's previous speech regarding standing by himself, because our project of Halki's copper mining complex will show us what kind of soldiers we really are. Will we succeed, or stumble and fall? How would each of us fare in such situations? Will every single one of us be able to truly stand by himself before helping others? For Thomas couldn't continue because someone suddenly sneezed a couple times. However, this interruption fired him to raise his voice in finishing his speech. For I believe that we never fall completely. We are never losers. We always pick ourselves back up to stand, and we never back down from the challenges and hardships of this world. And through this thinking, with our previous experiences, and because of our sheer beliefs and faith on our group, Ephraim and I will lead and ride in these torturous waves and perilous challenges of our period in life to make ourselves into a stronger group who can always reunite upon the righteous and grandiose causes. Thomas finished his speech. Placidos had his mouth open by now and couldn't say anything for a while. He then started clapping slowly and prepared to say his response to the speech. That was wonderful, Thomas. I didn't expect that kind of answer. Other soldiers began clapping too. When the clapping began subsiding, Thomas cleared his throat before speaking more. I kind of said something like that in the beginning, so I was just reluctant to say it again. That's all. I want to see us grow together, but it'll be great if we earn some money along the way. Magnus raised his hand to speak. Captain Thomas and Officer Ephraim, now I get what you mean when you started planning out that mining complex and getting us involved in it too. When 5 of you left for Constantinopolis 2 days ago, those of us who were left behind got engaged in talking amongst ourselves, and I was happy to have seen my fellow soldiers doing that. The days before you got us on Halki Island. Wasn't that exciting and we didn't talk much. So, I thank you guys for frequently having some sort of event for us to do. Ephraim chuckled. That's right. That's why we always work hard in finding out a way to keep all of us busy with events and work. Placidus finished his turn and handed the speech staff to Constance. Constance looked at Magnus and smirked. Hey, Magnus, I thought you were an officer. So, why did you address Ephraim with the title? I don't feel like sharing this, Magnus said. Constance flinched and he felt challenged. What do you mean you don't want to share it? I demand you to share it. Obviously, you were demoted, but I just want to know why. Magnus started shifting in his seat uncomfortably. Then he sighed. Lord Pericles demoted me, saying that I was the least qualified out of 3 officers under Captain Thomas. He also said other groups didn't know why we get to have 3 officers when they don't. Constance cocked his head, pretending to be clueless. Do you think you know why you were the least qualified person? I don't know, Magnus said. Constance folded his arms. Really? You know yourself the best. Apicius realized that Constance and Placidus were fighters just like Lucio. The difference was that their usual aim was different than Lucio's. Whereas Lucio pins someone down and prepares to knock him out with one shot, Placidus and Constance pin them down and nibble on them, gradually eroding the victim's patience and enjoying every split moment of toying the other person's uncomfortable moment. With this thought in mind, he decided to study the 2 engineers further. Gosh, I don't know. Do I have to prove it to you somehow that I don't know? Magnus said. Constance unfolded his arms and rested them on his legs. Of course, you have to, soldier. It's easier if you listen to me and just tell us about it. I know that Lord Pericles is very detail-oriented when he demotes or promotes someone. Magnus grimaced very much and glared at Constance. Suddenly, Gilroy raised his hand. I will say it on behalf of Magnus. Lord Pericles told us that we as a group weren't holding our own share of burden in the battlefield. He said that he was originally against letting a captain have more than 2 officers, even though he may have more people in his group, but was trumped by the executives on that decision, since they don't live in the same room as Captain Thomas and Officer Kai's group, which means they needed a titled person to be the room's leader in overseeing the well-being of it. For the battlefield's burden, though, it meant fighting in the front lines. Gilroy paused and glanced at others for a while, perhaps trying to realize how they are absorbing this information. You know that archers, for the most part, are exempt from fighting hand-to-hand combat, but that's because they don't wear heavy armor. He told us that we wear heavy armor, so we must engage in hand-to-hand combat to the best of our abilities. Then, he said that we weren't doing that enough. Somebody obviously reported that to him, or he saw us directly on, and our actions might have been just too much of a selfish act for him to simply let it pass for a while. So we are now placed under Officer Ephraim's group, which is also Captain Thomas' primary small group. Thanks for sharing that with us, Gilroy. I really appreciate that. And it seems that our friend Magnus didn't feel like speaking up. Constance said and smiled in thanks. The speech staff was then passed on to Vincent. At the end, Apicius forgot what Vincent said, because it wasn't anything big deal to him. So the speech staff quickly passed on to Magnus, who surely had been waiting for the moment. Ahem, Constance. Magnus seemed to have a score to settle with Constance. I have a question for you. Why did Commander Kairos withhold you from going with Captain Thomas and Officer Ephraim's group to the island? I'm quite sure Captain Thomas would have tried hard to get you going together with Placidus on the journey. So, what was it, Constance? He had a wicked smile. Suddenly, Thomas raised his hand before Constance even managed to speak. So Magnus pointed the speech staff at him. Yeah, I was wondering about that too. He strongly denied my suggestion in bringing both of you to Helki Island, which is very unlike him. And I wouldn't have been able to persuade him at all, no matter what, with the look on his face. Thank you, Magnus. You bring up something that I was really curious about. Constance was crushed because Thomas had joined up with Magnus. There is no way out of a mess if the captain gets interested in it, which means that the victim has to speak. It was like a hunter had finally become the prey, and he seemed cornered and ashamed. leading everyone who was seated around to believe that the reason was something bad. Just like Magnus, Constance was very reluctant to say anything. So, Placidus decided to raise his hand to speak. I will speak on behalf of Constance. Placidus couldn't go far. Magnus immediately swung the speech staff like a madman. Don't you dare speak, Placidus! Don't you dare! He pointed the staff at Constance. Constance, you speak! He looked at Placidus in much anger. Placidus, how dare you try to help him sneak his way out of such an important matter? Constance clenched his fist. But Gilroy covered for you. It's surely fair for me to be covered by Placidus. But that was after you were quite much done with chopping me down to the last bits of whatever self-esteem I had left. You started this fight. At least I'm going over a topic that nobody else knows about, whilst you touched on the matter that pretty much everyone else knew to a certain extent. For Captain Thomas, even though he was very curious, he had kept his silence because you didn't attack him. But I won't be so merciful on you after what you've done to me. I will make you tell every last detail that you may be hiding. Then I'll make sure that you had your fair share of shame. So, tell us what happened with Commander Kairos. Magnus folded his arms over his chest, demanding an answer. Such a heated conversation was a bit uncommon during the Saturday discussions of Thomas' group, for even Lucio looked dumbfounded to realize how awful the situation had become. It seemed that Thomas tried to move from his seat to break it up due to such intense atmosphere around them, but Ephraim pulled him back and muttered to him to let them vent it out since nothing would be able to stop them. Apostios wondered how those two guys would be able to make it up with each other at the end. But he stopped his thinking when he saw that his comrades around him were looking at Constance in curious faces that demanded an answer. Constance took a deep sigh. One day, Commander Kairos ordered me to fix up the ladder of a fortress tower. Placidus was ordered to fix our resource building's door, which fell out of its hinges. Apparently, I didn't fix the ladder properly, so when one of the fortress keepers tried to go up, the ladder became weak and broke. Therefore, Commander Kairos told me that he'll be expecting me at the headquarters after the raid. I thought he had forgotten about the whole incident when the raid ended, and he didn't send anyone to fetch me. But he finally did so on the day when Thomas and Ephraim set out the day to scout out the island. On the other hand, the fortress keeper got his right ankle hurt, so he wouldn't be able to properly walk for a couple weeks. That's why Commander Kairos disciplined me and made me help out that fortress keeper until he gets better. By then, the soldiers began nodding in relief that it wasn't that serious of a news. However, Magnus thought otherwise. Magnus shook his head. I don't think that's everything you have shared with us. What do you mean, not everything? Constance said. If that was all to it, then why were you with that archer who Lord Pericles carried to the ship that day? The dialogue seemed intense, and Commander Kairos was with you the whole time. He kept on asking what you did. Magnus said. When Constance slightly flinched, Magnus had a gotcha smile on his face. Edvin raised his hand this time. Oh yeah, I was wondering why that archer was unconscious at that time. I remember talking to him for a while as we were pushing our carts, and he seemed totally fine. Constance sighed again. He had initially spoken the latter incident to put an end to Magnus' interrogation as soon as possible, but it was obvious that Magnus knew much more than what he was previously giving out. When Seth came rushing and told us to flee the town, we encountered each other in one of the houses looking at the same pouch full of silver coins, and both of us wanted that. However, that guy quickly took it and fled the house before I could get close to it. Therefore, I got angry and followed hard after that guy. In the end, I had more stamina and managed to catch up to him. I insisted that he share the coins at least, but he refused, so I punched him on the head and snuck away with the pouch under the cover of the trees. I never knew that he actually fainted and became a burden to Lord Pericles until Commander Kairos inquired me about it. Vincent raised his hand. Shame on that archer first, since he lost in the race against the engineer. He shook his head. Gibson raised his hand. No, Vincent, that archer was fairly winded after the day's battle when he ran. Constance was not, because he was the wagon crew during the battle, Gibson said. It was safe to say that Gibson had no idea regarding the fight that the wagon crew endured. Therefore, Placidus was going to say something about it, but Thomas raised his hand to silence him. Let's not go astray from the main point of his talk, which was that he had attacked another soldier. However, there was something more important than the assault. Thomas turned to look at Constance. Constance, why weren't you maintaining your position by the wagons when this happened? Those were waiting right by the town. You were to stay there and look after them. But you went away from your position to raid a house. He paused for a while to let the information linger amongst the soldiers. Why didn't you obey the instructions of Lord Pericles? He then stared at Constance for a while. Lastly, if that wasn't enough, Commander Proteus personally ordered you guys to go back to the ships when they were bringing back kids. So, tell us why you were so disobedient and reckless. Constance hesitated very much. I had a sudden desire to raid a house, so I told my wagon mates to just go without me, in return for getting them some share of stolen goods. Due to being very upset, Thomas started breathing heavily and slapped his knees to gain further attention. Constance, you know that's a serious crime in this organization. Not only did you leave your post, but you also incurred bodily damage on another soldier, not to mention ignoring the Lord and the Commander's orders. If Lord Pericles and other executives hear about this issue, then there will be consequences for you amounting to heavy fines and various sanctions. He paused to breathe and calm himself down. Coming back, this is your first time, and you have mostly been a soldier with good moral standings, so I'm against putting you through such punishment. But it depends on what Commander Kairos thinks. Did he tell you about this by any chance? He then raised his eyebrows. Commander Kairos said pretty much the same thing, and he made me return the coin back. He then gave some coins to the archer and gave me two, while saying that the rest would be deposited in the treasury. After that, he told us that had I done my job, or had we shared the coins, then nothing would have happened, and nobody would have been harmed, Constance said. Yeah, he's right. Commander Kairos would most likely fetch me, Captain Claus, Niles, and George to talk about this, whether it's okay to let you go off the punishment or not. Even if we agree to not report this, we'll make you do something, Thomas said. Thank you for your mercy, Thomas, Constance said. When this part was over, Magnus passed the speech staff on to Gilroy, and then it swiftly passed over to Gibson, Seth, and came back to Thomas because everyone else had finished their part very quickly, and things spoken didn't matter much. Therefore, Thomas attempted to continue the discussion. Okay, Constance and Magnus, are you cool with each other now? They both shook their heads. Okay then, I'll make sure to get you guys talking when we are done with this meeting. Then we'll... Thomas couldn't go far because someone knocked on the door loudly. Hey man, what's up? Thomas said when the fortress keeper came in. Captain Thomas, Lord Pericles and the melee soldiers have arrived in the fortress, and he wants everyone to come out to the headquarters field, Fortress Keeper said. Darn, that doesn't sound good. But okay everyone, let's get out, Thomas said. Thus, the discussion was over, and soldiers quickly got out. When they were rushing to the headquarters field, Apotheos decided to ask Ephraim. Ephraim, why weren't Placidus and Constance addressing Thomas as Captain Thomas? Apotheos said. Oh, that's a perk of being the staff members. They don't have to address captains and officers, because they are technically allowed to order any of us to do something. For example, a spy could order someone to lend some help with spying. A recorder could order someone to tell about the recollection of his events during the battle. And engineers, especially engineers, they can order anyone to help them out in whatever things they do. That's why they are allowed to bypass the title guidelines, to make things smooth for all of us. But in return, all of us call them by their names too. However, they still need to address the commanders and Lord Pericles with their respective titles. Apotheos nodded in appreciation and continued following others. So that's it for chapter 16, and next one will be chapter 17, which is called The Shakeup. So get ready for that, folks.